it's my great pleasure to introduce the second speaker of the day. And the second session, just like Nathan said, will be about self-directed professional development. So a lot of self today in the morning. And this session will be delivered to you by Chris Farrell, a learning and development specialist, professional in the field of education and training. And he is the head of training and development with Center of English Studies. He's a member of the Board of Trustees of EAQUALS, and he chairs the English UK Teachers Development Advisory Group. And he's also a lecturer at City University of Dublin, and he has written and delivered plenty of online courses for NILE, for Trinity College London. So he is actually the best person to guide you through the self-directed professional development. So thank you very much, and over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much. That is a very big introduction. I know we're not. I'm conscious of the fact that everyone has been sitting and going through that hour-long session. We're happy enough for me to start. If anybody wants to stand up, stretch their legs, jump and touch the ceiling, or whatever you want to do, please do, because I know it can be a long morning. First thing, most importantly, I must say to you is that today is St. Patrick's Day, and I'm speaking to you from Dublin in Ireland. It's actually a public holiday. There's a big festival, a big celebration, and it's very frowned upon to make Irish people work on St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it, but here we are, all in the name of good learning. It's good to see so many different countries, just in the chat from Nathan's talk and coming through there. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I can see that some people are up in the middle of the night. Some people have just had their lunch, have had their dinner. So people are at various stages of their day.
Chris, Chris, hi, Sean.
Hi, Sean.
Yeah, your video is doing a bit of a lagging thing for me.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, could you just click it on and kick it off? We are, as you said, we're still a little bit, so let's see if that. Yeah, that's better.
It's better.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think your connection's quite slow. So audience, Chris's video might lag during the session, but his sound seems perfectly fine.
Super.
At the moment. So let's see what happens.
If the video does lag, just tell me and I can click it on.
No worries.
Again. Super. Yeah. So we're going to go through. We're really following on from Nathan's session, and I appreciate that, Nathan, doing that segue through, because the topics are, they're not mutually independent. They actually are quite usefully segued, and it's almost like you planned it at Oxford, quite usefully dovetailed into each other. 2:34 p.m. in Iran. Thank you. Yeah, and I don't know if anybody read the paper Dr. Sarah Mercer, Dr. Donald Freeman, and myself co-wrote for OUP last year on self-directed professional development. If not, I'm sure a link will appear in the chat box at some point. I would really recommend having a look at that, because it's the two doctors mostly did a huge amount of excellent work, and it's really, really useful. The speaker, okay, you can hear me. As long as you can hear me, that's the most important thing. So what's been interesting is obviously we've been looking at self-directed professional development last year while writing the paper, and then with the advent of ChatGPT 3.5 and now 4, it kind of changes the conversation a little bit. So as we're going through this session, it's something I will mention more and more, because with the rise of, for want of a better word, of these more powerful AI models, we are perhaps better able to engage in certain elements of self-directed professional development, because we can use the AI as a tutor, as a sounding board in some contexts. So that's going to shape the conversation. I think we're in a really fortunate place in education, in that we're lucky to be engaged directly in in AI in a lot of contexts because we have to be, and we're getting to see how certain AI models can be used beneficially, hopefully. Oh, super. I'm reading all the comments. I should stop reading the comments and just go ahead. Yeah, so we're going to look at self-directed professional development, and obviously this is a massive, massive field, and it means a huge amount of different things for different people. As you can see in the paper, something as simple as attending this session, reading an article can be self-directed, or it can be all the way on to, getting involved in a research program yourself, action research, or even going on to do a formal qualification, as long as it is something which is guided and directed by yourself. So it covers a spectrum of different activities. What we want to look at in these two sessions, so the session today and the session tomorrow morning with Jun Lee, is basically the theory behind self-directed professional development, which I'm going to look at, some models. And then tomorrow, it's going to be more practical application of some of the self-directed professional development techniques and tactics. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your mindset, I will focus a lot on the theory and some of the models for self-directed PD. So strap in for that. It's important from the outset to define what we're going to talk about, and we go back to the paper we wrote last year. Self-directed professional development is when a teacher intentionally chooses. So that's kind of criteria one, is the intentional choice. It's not dictated by somebody else. It's not accidental. The teacher has actually chosen and selected events, activities, material perhaps to engage with in order to examine, extend, or improve their professional practice. And I do think it's important to pause at this point and consider that professional development is not always corrective. It's not always trying to fix a problem. It can be to examine positivity in an area. It can be to extend your learning in a particular area based on your curiosity or based on your desire to do X, Y, and Z. And it doesn't always have to follow what we might call a deficit model and have a negative idea around it. So I hope that's clear for everybody. It's not supposed to be punitive. It's not supposed to be a punishment. There's a number of practical considerations in kind of all learning, but particularly in self-directed learning, mainly because obviously, as the name goes with self-directed, there's nobody guiding and prompting, nobody even coaching you as you go all the way through, unless you've sought the help of somebody like that, a critical friend. And Nathan mentioned SMART, and having SMART objectives is absolutely essential, and we're going to dig into that a little bit. When we're considering self-directed learning, the first thing that I want you to make clear is the purpose of the activity, and this is what we go back to, the conscious choices, intentional choices of why you're engaging with a particular activity, a particular resource in terms of your development. And the main reason for this is directionless self-directed learning can be fun, but also it can be very frustrating, and you can use a lot of resources and use a lot of time, use a lot of energy going in so many directions or no direction that it can be very frustrating. And obviously, if we're on a formal course, the direction, the parameters of the course are provided for us. But if we are self-directed, we need to consider why we are doing what we're doing and why we're doing it. Have a clear learning objective, for want of a better word. Have a clear purpose and intention in what you are doing. And this is I would say fundamental step. In these objectives, you can break them down into the SMART model. So if you want to improve, if we're looking at a deficit model and we say, I want to improve my ability to develop my students' pronunciation. So my students are having an issue with pronunciation. I want to go away and fix that issue. I want to find out why this issue is happening and how I can improve, how I can extend my teaching resource in order to best meet the needs of the students. So the objective in this case must be specific. So you must drill down into what you're actually going to try to focus on. So the really specificity of the objective. It should be measurable. So some of the problems that people encounter with self-directed or undirected learning is that they don't know if it's been successful or not. You know, if you're doing a formal course, you might pass or you might fail, you might get a certain percentage. This is why setting objectives which have a clear target is quite important for you in self-directed learning. So you can measure whether it was successful or not, or whether it was passable, whether it was okay, something like that. If it's not measurable, then there's a case that it won't be impactful, because you don't know if it has been good or bad, and you just move on and say, well, I did that. I don't know. I don't know if that was any use. There's also a case of measurement being the activity itself. So maybe engaging in the learning itself, you know, it could be, I want to watch 1 hour of a webinar, you know, and the measure is, did I watch an hour? It's not, did I use the information? It can be pretty much just, did I achieve the thing? So your measurements, your success criteria should be clear for you, even if they're not, you know, so valid and so reliable long term. Your objective should be achievable. Obviously, it should be something which is doable for you without support, because it's self-directed. Should be relevant for your context. And again, you know, if it's irrelevant, it's just not going to be as impactful. It might be something which is a curiosity for you, and that's fine. And it should be time bound. And this is one of the issues with self-directed learning, is that obviously we as teachers are frequently encouraged, and we might anyway, engage in lifelong learning. But self-directed learning probably should be best achieved if it's broken up into manageable units of, in this period, I'm going to do this and I'm going to try to achieve this, and this is how I'm going to measure it. Using some sort of structural objective is going to help, I guess, help with your sanity and help with your feeling of esteem and your motivation as you engage in self-directed learning. Also important is the content you use to engage with self-directed learning. And this is our resource. So are we using critical friends, our colleagues? Are we using YouTube videos? Are we using articles? Are we going to conferences? What is the content for our self-directed learning? Is it relevant? Is it appropriate? Is it good? Is it up to date? Because obviously the content is going to inform us a huge amount, you know, in our practice. So getting good content is quite a challenge, because there's so much content out there. So for self-directed learners, one of the big challenges is the skill of curation, actually being able to curate and keep appropriate content, building up a bank of resources that you think are useful and supportive for you as you go along. Because, you know, if you do a course, they have all of the material and they say, this is the good material, this is the stuff you need to know. When you're self-directed, it's just you and Google, and that can be scary. With content, it's probably appropriate now to start considering AI and start considering ChatGPT and Chat 3.5 and 4, because obviously this is content which is generated by the AI model and can be relevant to you, but you need to be quite judicious in your use and your application of this. Fourth consideration in terms of practicality for self-directed learning is your community. And we're going to look a little bit at community of practice later on in the session. For me, I think social learning and self-directed learning go hand in hand. Using your community, and whether it's your community in terms of your students, whether it's community in terms of your colleagues, or whether it's a peer network on a local level, on a national level, or something like this. It's having critical friends and having a community of people who may not even be like-minded, but they are at least able to engage with you in your own learning process and support you and challenge you in your own learning process. So I think we're obviously, the cliche goes, we're social animals, and I think very frequently social learning or interpersonal learning is an important driver, important motivator for a lot of people. So why not lean into it, and why not try to utilize it as best we can? Number 5, and this goes back to our SMART objectives, having deliverables, having achievables, having something that you want to be able to do and measure at certain junctures in your self-directed learning. One thing I've noticed in my experience is that motivation wanes as the longer you go down without any sort of check on success and any sort of achievement, I suppose. And so you do have to build that in yourself. You do have to say, well, I'm going to read 1 chapter in 3 weeks. So in 3 weeks' time, I'm going to go back and see, did I achieve that or not? Did I deliver upon my own promise? And I do think it's important for you to have your calendar and have your schedule of deliverables that are again time bound and measurable, because otherwise it can get very draining, and it's very difficult to motivate yourself if there's no markers along the way. And then finally, in terms of practical considerations, and obviously this list is not exhaustive, there are lots more, but sustainability, long-term sustainability, long-term usability of your learning, because what you're trying to do is, you're engaging in a marathon with self-directed learning. It's not a sprint. So if you're setting out objectives, obviously they have to be realistic and achievable. They have to be in some way sustainable for your own, 1, for your own practice, 2, for your own well-being, 3, your own mental health, your time considerations, your community. I mean, you have to be realistic with the expectations you have upon your own learning community. And also this goes in with green sustainability as well, and environmentally friendly. I don't think it's a massive issue in self-directed learning, but is something sustainable is a question we must ask ourselves in all learning contexts. Is this something which can continue, or have I gone too far too fast? Is it relevant in terms of my students? Because you might be pushing ahead with something which the students are just about keeping up with, but it's not going to be long-term sustainable for them to stay with you. So these are 6 considerations in self-directed learning. They all cover similar ground. It's all just about providing the focus that a directed course would provide for you, but actually doing it for yourself and making it work for yourself. And the reason we want to do this is we want to provide a framework for our own development. We want to provide a clear ideas of the direction of our own development. And we also want to not trick ourselves, but certainly nudge ourselves in terms of motivation, because motivation and keeping your attention, can be really tricky as we go. Anybody who's ever made a New Year's resolution, anybody who's ever tried to train for a half marathon, or never mind a marathon, anybody who's ever tried to stick to a diet, you know that if your goals are not sustainable, if your targets are not achievable, you're just not going to do it, and you're going to have a bit of a stigma towards it, and you're going to think, well, I can't do that, or that's not for me, or you might avoid it. The idea for self-directed learning is that you make it part of your practice, and you make it, dare I say, enjoyable, and you make it something which you actually want to do, and you want to talk about, and you want to perpetuate. So that's the gospel. That is the main overview. And I just wonder, any questions at this point? I just wonder if there are any questions on the first kind of practical considerations before we go into the theories. I'm just looking in the Q&A. How do you personally develop professionally? Good question. That was a question at the it was a question just 5 minutes ago. I look at personally, and this is off. What I try to do is, and maybe I'm guilty of a deficit model. I look at areas of my I look at blind spots. I'd call them blind spots. Areas of my practice that I don't know a lot about, and I try to put myself in uncomfortable situations where I learn what I don't know, if that makes sense, or I kind of get an idea of what I don't know, and then try to go and find the expert or find someone who might be able to teach me a little bit about that, find the material and dig into it and then try again. It's almost like a test, teach, test method on myself. I try to find something which I can't do and tinker around with it until I'm competent enough in it. It's kind of shining the torch into the different corners of the dark room of your own profession. That's what motivates and challenges me. Does that make sense? Oh, there's loads of questions. Okay, I'll try click through a few. How can teachers support students in a self-directed learning in a proper way? Really big challenge, supporting students in their self-directed. One, we have to consider if people are good learners. Because frequently we're all guilty of it, engaging in passive learning, receiving the learning. And we look at the models of pedagogy. Obviously, pedagogy is childhood education, and it involves a huge amount of delivery by the expert, by the teacher. We as adults and kind of late teenagers into adults move into principles of andragogy, adult learning, where there's a lot more active learning needed. And hopefully what we're moving into, and I always pronounce this wrong, houtagogy, which is, the self-directed learning, the theory of self-directed learning. So we're always moving towards that from childhood through. We're moving into, actually, I want to find that knowledge myself, because we're moving out of formal education as well. Your students have that apprenticeship of observation where they're used to the teacher teaching them. So self-directed learning is a big training process that you'd have to engage in, because it's not going to be something which is very natural for them, I would guess. Big challenge. Any advice for material that is both enjoyable and educational for material or for teachers? That is a massive question. I don't know the context enough to know how I'm going to be able to do that. So I might come back to that later. What if the teacher doesn't know where to start when is very difficult? Okay, so that's a good question. Where to start? Because the journey of 1,000 miles, we know. Where to start? What I would very much start in is, something you like. Start with something you're interested in. Start with something you're good at. If you begin with the negative, you're going to have that idea of the more you dig into a negative, you're going to find another thing you can't do, another thing you can't do. Start by saying, do you know what? I really enjoy this, and I'm going to learn more about that. Okay? You're going to learn more. You're going to practice more and more about the thing that you learn. In that, hopefully, you're going to pull on other threads, which will lead you to being a more complete professional, we would hope, the dream. So start, your in is going to be hopefully a positive in, and in that, you're getting your victories, you're achieving your victories, you might throw in something that might be a bit of a challenge as you go along. But don't start with a big negative saying, I need to fix this. Start with a positive. Watch a video where you go, do you know what? I know everything in this video. Super. Next thing, a bit more challenging. Teachers don't know where to start. Okay, got that. Measure the difference. Okay, that's differentiation. That's going to be something quite different to what we're talking about, Sidrat. Measuring the different students with different strategies. So that is going to be something different. Can you share any websites? Give us a practical strategy for self-regulation. Practical strategies for. I honestly don't know. I'll be honest with you. Maybe somebody, one of the moderators, might be able to answer that one, because I don't know any websites that might be able to do that for me. Measure different students. Okay. How would you suggest to set measurable goals? That is something which is personal. So I can't help you with that. Setting measurable goals is something which you can say, that is in some way achievable. What I would do, and it goes back to Professor Google, go back and look at SMART goals, how to set goals. There's loads of tips, there's loads of videos on that, and we could do that. Share any websites? I don't know. Support students in self-directed learning in a proper way. Again, students are a bigger challenge than teachers. Material is useful for self-directed learning. The OUP website has some really useful material, and also the paper that we wrote last year would have some. Okay, I'm going to continue on, and then I'm going to come back, because I think I could get bogged down in questions for a while. Really useful questions, and obviously if we had 4 hours, it would be, I would love to. I want to look at some general theories, and the thing I want to do with you today is I want to show you some general theories in order for you to be able to frame your own development. Because obviously we can go and do whatever we want in terms of self-directed learning, but I want you to have a structure on what you want to do. Not all the time, but if you want to make it impactful, if you want to make it sticky, we want to think what structure is going to be useful for me in order to, what's going to be the secret which will make this a little bit more useful, to make your time a little bit more valuable. The first thing which is often considered when we look at self-directed learning is something called Malcolm Knowles' andragogy model, and this is based on adult learning principles. Okay, so the behavioral economics of adult learning, and there's 5 key areas in the idea of andragogy, in the adult learning. Adults should be, if you look at the top of the chart there, problem orientated, and that's, according to Knowles, our nature. Our nature is to focus on a problem and try to fix the problem. And I know I said already that we shouldn't have this deficit model, but in Knowles's andragogy model, it's quite motivating to have a problem and fix a problem. Have an itch, scratch the itch. And this is our why. According to Knowles, we need a why. So this is something which might motivate you. Candida, you talked about getting that first step. You know, the why might be something which gets you in that first step. In adult learning principles, according to Knowles, we should have experience of education. We should have experience of receiving education as such, or engaging with education in some way. We should have a degree of internal motivation. Not all of us are internally motivated, to an equal standard, or to do the same or the right things. So this is a bit of a challenge for ourselves, especially if everybody's it's a busy world. You're working, you've got your commute, you've got other things happening. Motivation, it can be a challenge. So if we say your self-directed project is going to take an hour a day, not sustainable. If it's 15 minutes while you're on the bus, or 50 while you're having lunch, whatever, that might be more sustainable. 15 minutes a week, whatever. So internal motivation is only as good as what you're expecting to put yourself through. In Knowles' andragogy model, we should be ready to learn, and this is something I've looked at a lot, because sometimes we know with students, you can only really develop students' language if it's the next stage of their competency development, if that makes sense. If you're trying to teach them something which is 2 levels above them, it's not going to be as effective as if you're teaching them something which they're ready to learn. So for you as an adult learner, you're not going to go from finishing your basic teaching course, your preparatory training course, into looking at principles of applied linguistics for a PhD. You're potentially not ready to learn that. So we have to give ourselves achievable victories, which are the next competency up for us. And andragogy, according to Knowles, should be self-directed, which is the whole thing we're talking about. Self-directed, maybe I should clarify, doesn't involve isolation. You're not always alone in self-directed learning. You should have some supports, but the guidance and the goals is all by you. And I have in my notes there, it should be of immediate value. And this is the difference, I guess. We look at models of self-directed learning of near learning and far learning. So nearer learning, in terms of situational learning, is if it's directly transferable to your context. So if you're learning something which can directly be applied in your context. Far learning is if you're learning a transferable skill which it's not directly applied to your context, but it can be utilized in your context. In self-directed learning, we tend to focus a little bit more on fixing immediate issues, or something which is immediately going to extend my ability and practice of immediate value. And that's just in terms of motivation, in terms of how we're designed. So that's Knowles' andragogy model. I would really recommend digging into it a little bit because what you might find is you have an idea of what you want to do, but the andragogy model says, no, actually, this is the tried and tested, we might say, way of actually getting my toe in the water and moving forward on that. So I would recommend having a look. The next theory we would look at is Desi and Ryan, or Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory, SDT. And this is a motivation theory. And for me, if we look at self-directed learning, motivation is so organization and motivation are the two primary pillars for me. Organization is what we've looked at, having objectives, and motivation is, are you going to actually do it? It's your diet plan versus your actual engagement with the diet plan. It's having gym membership, actually getting up and going to the gym, you know, and the organization doesn't work without motivation, and motivation isn't as effective without organization. So we need to consider these two pillars in our self-directed learning. And this self-determination theory gives us an overview of how we can best motivate ourselves, I suppose, which pillars are most important in this area. And for Deci and Ryan, or Desi and Ryan, motivation is triggered by independence and control. So if we have a degree of control over what we're doing, how we're doing it, when we're doing it, all of these kind of things make us feel a little bit more grown up and give us a little bit more independence and control over our own self. I really subscribe to this. I find that when a timetable is set for me, when goals are set for me, I follow them, but they don't have a massive impact on me. Whereas if I make a promise to myself and I say, do you know what, I'm going to do that, you know, there's only so many times you can lie to yourself before you go, okay, come on, you got to actually do this. Yeah. And make it bite size, you know, independence and control, you know yourself, you're not trying to impress anybody. You're not going to say, I'm going to read this book in 1 week. You know, you're not going to do that. You have to say to yourself, I'm controlling my time, I'm controlling the content, I'm controlling everything I'm doing. So be kind to yourself. You know, don't be your worst teacher, I suppose. Second, we're motivated by mastery, and this is why I always think that you should start with something that you know or you like, because it's a little bit of a dopamine hit where you're like, yeah, I can do this. I'm pretty good at this. You know, and that's gonna lead you further along, rather than sitting there and going, oh my God, I don't know any of this. Having something where you can say, yeah, that's something I can do, and now there's a little tip that I might be able to do it a little bit differently, not better, but a little bit differently. Add another tool to my Swiss Army knife, I suppose. So mastery is a big motivator for us. And this is why it's so useful to set goals and to have these targeted, measurable goals, because when you hit a goal, you've mastered that. Tick, I've done it, achievement, go. And you know, we might be tricking ourselves, but you know, it works. And also familiarity. And again, it's quite personal for me, because these three, I find myself going back to again and again. If I really don't know anything about a topic, it really demotivates me. If I can't even have a little in that I go, okay, I can see where you're coming from. So jumping from A2 into B2 is completely demotivating for me if I'm learning a language. I need something which is the next level, that even if it's a little bit higher, it's a little bit challenging. If I'm familiar a little bit with the context, yeah, I can begin to find myself in it. If I'm not familiar, it's quite demotivating, and you find yourself closing off to things and dropping attention. So this SDT, this self-determination theory, I really like it, and I find the practical application of these three things can be so useful in perpetuating my engagement with learning. So I would suggest go have a look and dig into that. There's lots of different exercises you can do around this that I would really suggest trying to get involved in. I've added double loop learning just because I really like it. I find it's kind of almost next level challenging, I guess, to the previous two models. and it's something I've only started doing in the past 2 years in terms of my own self-directed learning. Typically, what I would do is I would go through the basic model of an assumption. What do we want to do it? Have a strategy or technique, our learning, and then a result. So, I have an idea, I learn about it, and then I get the result. So I change that general thread that I'm talking about. Double loop learning just suggests going all the way back to your assumptions and see how your result affects your assumptions. So if you say, my assumption is that students learn best, when there's games, when I use games in the classroom. Students learn best when I use games in the classroom. So then I go and try it out and I say, oh, they don't always. Then I go back and go, why did I assume that? I got to really dig into where did that come from, and what other assumptions am I going with that I've actually never fully questioned. So it's not just fixing the issue, but it's actually fixing the issue is kind of a deficit model, but it's not just following that thread. It's actually when you reach the result, it's going back to the very start and going, hold on, why do I have these assumptions? And you might find your assumptions, they come from your training, they come from your context of learning, your apprenticeship of observation of how you've been a student in your life. But one of my core considerations in teacher training is justifying your choices in a class, creating your material in a training session. How do you justify why did you do all those things? And if we're able to go back and question our assumptions, we can begin to give ourselves reasons. We're not just, I assume it's going to rain today. Why? What are your reasons for that? And double loop learning just allows us that extra little layer, that extra little step that we go back and go, yeah, I assume that, but I can go along that. I really like it just because it gives me a little bit more of a challenge, and it's a blind spot. So it gives me a little bit more of a challenge, and sometimes one of my assumptions is actually a blind spot, which leads me to think, oh God, I'm making loads of other mistakes because of that assumption. So, I like double loop learning. It's been really helpful for me. A little bit more challenging, I think, than the other two, but and sometimes there's no value in it. Sometimes you go back and go, yeah, I assume it because it's true. But every now and again, you get a little bit of a gem. Can I ask at this stage? So we've looked at 3 different models. We've looked at the adult learning one, the andragogy model, and we've looked at the self-determination, and then the double loop as kind of a bonus model. Any big questions that I'm going to be able to answer in like 3 minutes? I'm going to just zoom through them because there's so many questions that I'm not going to be able to answer. Candidates don't know where to start. Okay, I got that one. 3-step experience learning cycle can be applied here. 3-step, I'm not sure what that means. Hotagogy. Let me try and spell hotagogy. I'll copy and paste it because I had it open there. I know I put it in the chat because I'm putting it in the questions and answers at the moment. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's a phonetic pronunciation. I've never actually looked it up. Okay, 360. Okay, I'm not gonna be able to answer that. How can I know a material is useful? Anita, you can't know a material is useful, and this is trial and error, community. Yeah, your own judgment. Actually being able to look at something, share it with a friend and go, is this any good? And this is why organizations like Oxford are really, really useful, because the material they have is generally good, whereas if you're getting something on the internet that has loads of pop-ups and things, might not be as reputable information. What parameters can we consider to identify if the content we are going to use is relevant or not? Yeah, the provider. I'd start off with that. If the provider is somebody reputable, the content is probably good because it's had to go through certain processes. How do you personally evaluate content you're going to consume for PD? For me, it's experience, because I know I look amazingly young because the sun is in my face, but I'm old, so I've done it a fair bit. And then also, if it's new context for me, it's provider. It's a reputable provider for the content. How do you think about mentoring? I love it. You need a good mentor. And you need focus as well. What methods would you implement to empower self-regulating? Empowerment, Maureen. Goal setting. If you're going to self-regulate, and that's more kind of Nathan's session, if you're going to try empower yourself, it's having achievable and sustainable goals at certain points. And say, I'm going to, this week, I'm going to watch one webinar, 30 minutes. And that's going to be empowering because tick, I did it. And then you can begin to take step by step as you go. But goal setting is quite empowering. Teachers are not motivated to attend trainings by nominating them. Yeah, if teachers are nominated and they have to attend trainings, it's not self-directed learning, is it? If they're being told they have to go to a training session, it's not self-directed. Yeah, result, of course, Sarah. Results can be achieved by, yeah, it can be done. Speaking of content, taking a practical example like improving pronunciation, where do you begin looking for content? Again, I'm going to say the Oxford website, or any sort of reputable publisher which will have pronunciation content. There's a million people on YouTube, but I'd go to a publisher because they do a lot more quality checks. What does it mean to develop professionally? If you take another field of teaching, do we develop professionally? Absolutely, yeah. Well, to develop professionally is obviously means different things in different contexts. And professional development is not just about improving your ability to do the job. It's holistic as well. It's improving you as a person. I think the main focus is you spend X amount of time in work every day in your life. So professional development is actually about engaging you as a person, developing you as a person, in order to make your life easier in work, make your work more stimulating, more engaging. So it's more of for me, it's more of a holistic focus. If I'm just doing the same algorithmic tasks, bang, 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 day in, day out, one, I think I'm going to be replaced by a machine, but two, it's not very fulfilling for me as a person. I think I'm going to have to just do one more. How can we create integrity in student world picture? Oh my God, Victoria, if you find out how to create integrity in student world picture, let me know, because I have no idea. What would be your initiatives to create an ecosystem for self-directed professional development? You need to find a couple of like-minded people. It depends what sort of ecosystem for self-directed professional development. There's national organizations and local organizations everywhere of people in the similar context. I'd start with your staff room. Like they're the most immediate ecosystem for self-directed development. So I'd start with your staff room and perpetuate it on from there. There's no point looking at the stars when your neighbors are right there. Okay. A couple more models. This is, I think it's quite applicable to teachers. It's generally used in business, the Jennings 70-20-10 model. And the reason I highlighted it is that a huge amount of learning is not, I don't mean applicable learning. So learning which is actually relevant to context. So learning which is used in a near context, rather than, learning about some geography or history or whatever, but learning which is applicable in a work context. 70% of that is done in action. So in the classroom, in context, in the staff room, as you're doing the job. Only 10% of this learning is done through conventional training. So by somebody actually sitting down and directly training the person. And I just wanted to highlight this to show that frequently we think, oh, I have to go to a training session, I have to go to a conference, I have to do that. These are all part of the 70%, because they should be something that you learn and apply. And the Jennings model, and again, dig into it a little bit, it's more focused on the general world of work, but it is a useful model, I think, for self-directed learning, because it shows us that a lot of what we're directing ourselves towards is learning in practice. Okay. And the last model I want to look at, just to get really technical, is a neuroscience model called the Davichi Aegis model. And this is focusing on the neuroscience of learning. It's what is needed in order for you to learn effectively. So there's four different criteria I suppose we could look at. I'm not going to do this justice at all, because it is a big theory and it's a big model, and I would really recommend you have a look at this model. I really like it as a general overview of how my brain works, or how brains work in general for learning. So even if you don't dig into it too much, know that attention is critical. So you need to actually pay attention to what you're doing. If you've got the television on, you've got whatever happening, blah blah blah, and you're not actually focusing, obviously you're not going to learn. We've all have students who are looking out the window or chatting to their friend. If you're not paying attention, the learning is not going to be as effective. Generating insights takes time. You have to be patient. You can't watch 10 minutes of a webinar and suddenly know everything about what's happening. That superficial knowledge is quite damaging to our long-term sustainable learning, I think, because we think we know. We aim for mastery. If we go back to the motivation models, we look to know as soon as possible, but actually frequently listening and learning before we are confident is a positive. We all have the students at A1 level who want to move up all the way to the next levels, because they think they're able to run before they can walk, and we need to be patient. Emotions govern. We learn best, and this depends on you. We learn best when we're happy, when we're confident, when we're disappointed, when we're sad. We're not going to be as good effective learning. When we're angry, that's going to cloud our ability to learn. So your environmental factors and your context are going to affect your learning. So you can't say, I'm going to read this chapter in 1 week, and then if you get bad news or something happens in that week, forget about it. You're not going to be able to do it effectively, and it's not going to be a positive learning experience for you. And then the idea that spaced learning sticks. So rather than say, and I'm very guilty of this, I'm going to read this chapter all in one go. What would be better is if I read 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%, rather than consuming it all as one big chunk. And this might work if you rewatch some of these ELTOC sessions, rather than doing them all in one big chunk and just having cognitive overload, saying, I'm going to actually watch 15 minutes of it, and then I'm going to go away and have a coffee and maybe chat with my friend, and then I'm going to do this. And, if you have time, of course, that's the luxury. So I really like that Aegis model. I think it helps me understand my brain a little bit more. We have to consider what works best with our needs, and our needs are contextual, our needs are personal, our needs are anything from financial to situational. So we really have to consider what's best for us in our context, and not overburden yourself by trying to do everything. We need to be judicious. I've mentioned social learning, so I want to consider it as an element of self-directed learning. And there's a couple more theories I'm going to present to you. And I know I've thrown a lot of information at you, but I'm just going to throw a couple more at you so you can spend the afternoon, obviously spend the lunchtime on Google having a look. The first social learning theory is something called Banduras social learning theory, and this just considers the factors in your social learning and how they are going to impact on the effectiveness of your learning. So the first one is environmental factors down the bottom. So the environment of your social learning. Is it your staff room? Is it your friends? Is it your online context? How many people are there? Are there 5 people? Are there 10 people? Are there 20 people? So the environment is going to have a massive impact on whether your learning is effective or not. Your behavior and the behavior of the people in your social learning context obviously is going to be massively impactful. If the behavior of those people is very opening and very hospitable to divergent opinions, or bad criticism potentially, is very open to that, then you're going to be more open to actually sharing your ideas. If the behavior is very critical and very negative, you might say, I'm not going to share too much, I'm not going to engage too much, and you're not going to learn then. And then obviously personal factors, you know, whether you want to share with these people, whether you like these people, and all of these different things. So these are, we say social learning. Oh yeah, go and do social learning, but actually you have to consider if it's effective social learning, if it's right for you, and are there any friction factors? Are there anything which might be barriers to social learning? I also want to look at communities of practice, and this for me is kind of the big beast of social learning. When I think of communities of practice, community of practice essentially is a group of professionals working together to support each other's learning. It's community that, you know, identify as a learning community, and they focus on practice, on practical application, on that 70% practical application of learning. And a community of practice, you know, can lead on to action research projects. It can lead on to professional development groups. It can lead on to just having a supportive community around you that can help you in the small things and in the big things. You know, if you're engaging in a course, a structured course, you might have a forum, you might have coffee mornings, you might have some sort of structure around that. But if you're engaged in self-directed learning, it can be very isolating, it can be very demotivating. So having a good community around you is really impactful, really motivating, even if it's just a WhatsApp group or a Telegram group or whatever. I would suggest that you seek out a community of practice, or seek out trying to build a community of practice. And again, have a look online. There's loads of different tips and loads of different models of communities of practice, which I think would be quite useful. So the next step for you guys, in practical terms, is the session tomorrow by Junli on self-directed learning in practice. I think that's going to be really useful in answering some of the questions of the practical applications of some of these theories and some of these ideas, because obviously we're looking at something which has a big spectrum of theoretical knowledge behind it, but actually what it really is important to is you and your context and your ability and your needs. So it's for you to consider, how can I do this? What's stopping me do it? What's stopping me doing it? And what are my objectives? You know, setting that plan as you go down. So, questions. I'm going to try blitz through a few of the questions, and again, as I said, a lot of them could be answered by Junli tomorrow in the session. Okay, can you give us an example of applying the double loop learning in your personal experience? Luis, there's so many different examples. You know, for almost, I think I do it a little bit automatically now. Let me think of the last time I did it. A lot of it is to do with, a lot of it, my recent one is to do with classroom management. Actually, the structure of the classroom. So presuming that, you know, boarding everything is going to be a good idea, presuming that the seating arrangement is going to be effective for this group, presuming that, you know, assuming the windows should be open, assuming all of these kind of things, and actually they don't, I have to go and re-evaluate that. So I'm kind of constantly doing it as a matter of course at the moment. Yeah. So maybe I'm just overthinking things. Are there some near learning topics that could apply to language teachers as a whole? Long Green, somewhere to start a personal development journey as a language teacher. Near learning topics. Yeah, I would say, and I mentioned pronunciation. I do think it's something in my experience that students really appreciate and teachers are sometimes afraid of. And I think digging more into pronunciation and how we can get a tip from a video on YouTube and then apply it in class. Get a tip, get a little, you know, whether it's back chaining or whether it's role playing, all these little kind of communication games. Try them and see if they work. Try them and see if they work. So for me, that's something I've recommended to teachers recently is communication games, pronunciation games and pronunciation tips. Try them and see if they're effective. Have a measurement of efficacy. What can I do if learners are not interested in learning English? Mamma mia. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that question. They're not. See, that's to do with learner motivation, I suppose. I ask ELTOC if you've got a session on learner motivation. I'm sorry, I can't. Like that's another session, Anna Karina. It's a whole other session. All you can do is do your best to engage all you can do is do your best to engage the students in some way, in something they're interested in. And I've been in the place before where I can't find anything the students are interested in. So I do apologize. This is why you need a community of practice. You need a community of practice of people around you who can say, okay, how can we make the first step? Okay, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. Candida, what if teachers don't know where to start? I think I've done that one. No, I did that one. I should actually just start deleting ones I've done. Material, I've done that. Fernanda, Maureen, I did that. Self-directed. Is it available with disabled students? Fatima, I don't understand. Is self-directed learning available? Yeah, well, as long as the material is accessible. I mean, there's a big push for accessibility worldwide. Materials should be accessible, and it's not a case of somebody being disabled. It's actually about the material being restrictive. Materials should be available and accessible to everybody. So that's to do with the material and the learning rather than the students themselves. If people are good learning, what are they not? If people are good learning, what if they are not good at learning? That's learner training. If people are good learning, what if they are not? Hey. Again, that's an unanswerable. I'm getting a lot of unanswerables. If people are not good at learning, we need to train them. And that involves learner training, which is, again, maybe I say to Oxford, we need to do a day on learner training. I'm happy to do. Learning materials tend to be pricey. How to find more? Yeah. So, and that's it. That's another community of practice. You need to find a community of practice of people who can help you source cheaper materials, or an organization which is willing to get subscriptions. IELTS exam can be self-directed. Yeah, IELTS exam can be part of your self-directed learning. Yeah, as long as you're, it's part of your journey. Yeah, absolutely. Difference between outcomes, goals, targets. Nadeem, for our context, it doesn't make a massive difference. It's just something you want to achieve. Okay, let's not get bogged down in what is this, what is that, because obviously they are different. They all have different concepts behind them. But what we want to do, call it whatever you want. It's something you want to achieve. Okay, it can be a goal, it can be a target, whatever, and the outcome would be the result of what you did. So let's not get bogged down too much. Can we use this model with ADHD students? I'm not qualified to answer that, Sarah. I'm sorry. If the question is based on knowledge, how can we measure the objectives? Yeah, and that's why it's self-directed. It's for you to consider what is success. So if it's knowledge, then now I'm comfortable that I know that, and you're not lying to yourself. I think I know that. You can maybe have a little test for yourself. Putting theory into practice possible? How hard? Yeah, it is hard. Is there at Oxford a course focused on andragogy and not pedagogy? The guys maybe can answer that one, Gloria. Would the various methods you've mentioned lead to possible conflicts? Yeah, absolutely. And this is why you need to judiciously apply. Don't base it all on assumptions. I want this session to be a stepping stone for you to go and read more and not just presume that they all are. I mean, the reason there's so many different theories, and there's millions more, is that some of them contradict each other, disagree with each other. And what I'm trying to share with you is some ideas around some of the theories which I've found useful in my personal practice and in my training practice. So absolutely, they don't always agree with each other. Other methods teacher might wish to implement. Sorry, theories can be merged, just follow the letter of spirit. No, they can be merged. Yeah, it's just about knowing what to do. Sarah, obviously follow them in spirit. It's self-directed, so you can pretty much do whatever you want. Nobody's checking. Examples of games. I've got 1 minute, so I don't, unfortunately. Again, that's another session. Examples of games. Maybe the Oxford website has some. What are competencies that self-directed learning requires from the teacher to help their students? Competencies that self-directed learning requires from the teacher to help their students. What are competencies that self-directed learning requires from the teacher to help their students? What does the teacher need to be in order to help students? Open-minded, I guess. That's a big question. Sorry if I can't answer Saf. If I can't answer that, that's too big for me. Which model would best? Yeah, I've got too many questions left. Are these questions going to be somewhere that I can text reply to? Because currently I think I'm out of time. Maybe the whoever is moderating has gone. I'm not going to be able to answer them all.
You've got about 5 minutes.
Have I? Oh, perfect. Oh, I thought I was finished at 12. Super. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Sorry. Let me go back to where I was. Question and answer. New. Sorry. Excellent. Yeah, I was trying to blitz through them because I thought you were going to cut me off at 12. Okay. Where was I? Difference in objectives. No, I did that one. Okay. Examples of games. No, I did that. I didn't know that one. Hamza. Oh no, Denise. Which model would work best with exploratory teaching development? You don't have to only choose one, and you might not even choose a model. Again, communities of practice. Communities of practice is going to be your best starting point as a support for exploratory teaching practice, because you are going to be stepping into the unknown, and you kind of do want people around you who are able to support you or who might know a little bit around that. So I would say communities of practice is your first step. Stuff like the Knowles andragogy model, that's just about knowing yourself. The Aegis model is just about knowing yourself and knowing your principles, but the community of practice one is one that's going to provide practical support for you, I would say. Hamza, do you recommend adding a process of experimentation to one of these frameworks? Oh, Hamza, I recommend adding a process of experimentation to everything. As long as it's judicious experimentation, and it's experimentation which, you check whether it worked or not, or whether there was any sort of tangible result. Yeah, definitely. Ahmad, we all trying to reflect new assumptions inside our classes. The issue is we normally face school leaders and supervisors who force us to apply what they want, not what we find. Yeah. And that's the big barrier to self-directed professional development, is that frequently there's something that you have to do. So self-directed professional development is for you to try find a way of, I guess, motivating yourself by choosing material and choosing some sort of control over your own learning process, despite the parameters which are put in place. There's nothing we can do about regulations. There's nothing we can do about restrictions, but we can just try to keep our spirit alive, I suppose, and say, well, this is actually what I'm interested in. It's what I'm going to focus on a little bit more. Hamza, I think that was Hamza, was it? Yeah. Sorry, Ahmed, that was Ahmed. Munaza, I like the concept of double loop learning. My question is, can we have more layers of learning? Yeah, absolutely. The problem, Munaza, and it's one of my favorite quotes, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, is if you're too open-minded, your brain will fall out. You have to at some point say, oh no, okay, you can go question the assumption, but at some point you have to say, okay, I'm happy enough that I don't need to know any more about that. Maybe that's just me. Abdallah, how can this idea be adapted according to individual differences? Which idea? How can any idea be adapted according to individual differences? I mean, this is our big consideration, and your big consideration, and I mentioned it, is what works best for you. What way do you like learning? This is a journey for you to begin to consider how best you learn. So that's a personal question you got to ask yourself, I think. Abdul Ram, is that important to use only latest materials and equivalents? No, you can use, materials from 50 years ago are going to be just as relevant if they're talking about the learning process. You might be able to question them and question whether they're completely accurate for the modern context, but I wouldn't rule out, you don't just have to read stuff that was published in the last 5 years. How can we apply double loop learning in teaching speaking skills? That's a question for Google. So double loop learning, I would suggest, is something there's loads of YouTube videos on how to use double loop learning. I just wanted to suggest it to you so you can go and look at certain uses in context. Yeah. So I'm not going to go into all of the uses in different skills, Rasha, but there's loads online for you. The same answer, Fatima Zikra. Double loop learning is a useful self-directed learning question for you. Find the answer to that question online somewhere, share it with your community of practice, because it will only lead you to more and more digging. For reskilling, how much time is suggested for self-directed professional development? that's an unanswerable question. Depends what you're reskilling from, and two, depends what you're doing at the time. And also it's sustainable. So it has to be something where you're interested in and you're able to consistently do it. Candida, how general versus context specific are theories? Theories are quite general, and application is context specific. So it requires you to be aware of your context and aware of your own needs. Speaking of double loop learning and strategy texting, I'm wondering if we can use how we do along with what we do. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Dung. Safa, how is self-directed learning is the key to new skills? And I'm not sure what that question means, but I've got more. Ghislaine, what is the most effective practical technique for self-development for teachers? That sounds like a question I'd ask ChatGPT. Depends on what works for you. Depends on the teacher. I mean, I can't say what's the most effective exercise for long distance runners. Depends on the runner. I feel like somebody's going to stop me answering these.
We are, yes, indeed. I was just wondering if Gregosh, you there?
I am here. Yeah, I'm always here.
No, not Chris. Gregosh.
Oh, sorry. I said, "Gosh, are you here?"
No. I'm not sure if his mic's working or not, because I can see it's on. Anyway, it is 5 past, so it is time to bring you to an end. Even though you were doing such a valiant effort at getting through all those questions.
I'm telling you, we could do more. If there's anything, no, I don't need to ask for questions. If these questions are somewhere, I can come on at some point and answer them. Later on, like at a different point, I can comment and answer. Are they on Facebook or YouTube or something?
No, they'll be in this. They're recording into the room. We're just discussing whether we can get the transcript from them, so don't worry. But yes, you'll get them back another time from it. Can you see all the nice thank yous that are coming up in the box?
Oh no, I can't. I can now. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. You guys are absolutely welcome. I'm just sorry I couldn't do 3 hours and try answer all your questions. I know it's quite short to go through all these self-directed theories, but hopefully it's given you some meat that you can go and dig into a little bit more and get some more ideas.